of results from discovery to patient care. I am joined by Dr. Caren Heller, the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation's Chief Scientific Officer this evening. We will share exciting information about the Foundation's research projects and explain how these can help and provide hope for people living with Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. Welcome, Dr. Heller.
Oh, thank you, Laura. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I just want to highlight one of the comments you made. I mean, we really are talking about going from discovery to patient care. And we'll touch on a few of those projects tonight. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Likewise. Before we get started, let's go over a few quick housekeeping items. Today's chat is meant to be educational purposes only. We encourage you consult with your healthcare provider before making any changes to your IBD treatment regimen. If you have questions about IBD research that we don't get to on tonight's call, you can contact the IBD Help Center by emailing info@crohnscolitisfoundation.org or by calling 1-888-MY-GUT-PAIN to get your questions answered. So with all of that said, let's get started. And Dr. Heller, would you explain how we as an organization, as the foundation, decide on our research projects and how do we provide funding?
Great. So we spend a lot of time really thinking about how to most wisely invest in our money, which is really, we know, thanks to all of the volunteers out there and the efforts that they make to bring in dollars to the foundation. So we really think about very carefully how to invest this as wisely and impactfully as possible. So one thing we do is about every 5 years, we bring together stakeholders, and that includes patients, caregivers, researchers, so scientists, clinicians, even some industry people, other funders, and we bring them together. And the last time we did this was in 2018-19. And they help us identify those areas of research that seem to be the most promising to accelerate, to get us to cures, improved treatments, and improving the quality of life of patients. So in other words, where are those areas in research where if we invest dollars, we will likely get to achieve our mission more quickly? And once we've identified on those areas, then how we fund is that we basically think about three pillars of funding. So first we have the pillar which we call investigator initiated. And that's basically where we say to the scientists in the community, and here I'm talking about a global community, because when we think of research, we want to identify the best research no matter where it is. And we say to the scientists, give us your best ideas. Here are priorities as we've laid out in what we call the challenges in IBD. Here are priorities, you give us your best ideas. And then we have groups of scientists in review committees, and they look over these projects, and depending on our budget, we then decide, we select those projects that are deemed to be excellent and that we can afford to fund. So that's one thing, investigator initiated. Yes.
Dr. Heller, can I ask a question? Are patients involved in the investigator-initiated reviews?
Yes. So thank you, Laura, for bringing that up. We have patients and caregivers on all of our research review committees. So in any situation where we are selecting projects to fund or to access our resources, we bring in the scientists, the clinicians, patients, and caregivers, because we want to be funding projects that end up having meaning and value to the patient and to the caregivers. So we have to go back to the three pillars. We have the investigator initiated, where the scientists come to us with their ideas. Then we have what we call research initiatives. And those are research projects where we, through our our, through the experts in the field and our own thinking and looking into it, we've decided that, this is an important area of research. Others aren't funding it. We need to lead the way. We need to get some breakthroughs to make it clear to others, especially National Institutes of Health, which have more dollars than we do, that this is an important area to fund. And so, for example, we were early to fund breakthroughs in the microbiome, in the genetic space. Now we're funding areas around the topic of fibrosis, because we know that patients suffer from strictures. And at this point, only surgery pretty much can resolve those strictures. So we're funding an understanding of the biology of these strictures to figure out, are there ways to prevent that? Are there drugs that could be developed that would prevent it? So that's what we call it. Yes.
Can you just define what a stricture is for those that may not be familiar with that term?
Sure. A stricture is in the gut. If it's an area where there's a buildup of extra tissue called fibrotic tissue. And it's sort of, if you think of the gut as sort of a tube, all of a sudden you get a blockage in the tube. And so the food can't go through. And that's a stricture. And it needs to be removed surgically if you get to the blockage state. So those are examples of some of our research initiatives. And then the third pillar we fund is what I call infrastructure, which is in the news a lot. And when we think about infrastructure, I think about sort of the interconnecting parts that will help more than one researcher do a research project. And so, for example, IBD Plexus is a huge infrastructure project that we have invested in and we manage. And it is a large data registry with linked biosamples that enable hundreds, if not thousands, of researchers to accelerate their ability to answer important questions, both related to the basic biology and understanding of inflammatory bowel disease, all the way through to identifying new drug targets or biomarkers that might indicate patients who would respond well to one therapy over another. So those are our three key areas: investigator-initiated, research initiatives where we identify areas to invest in, and then our infrastructure like IBD Plexus.
Thank you for that comprehensive overview. And I want to dive a little bit deeper into some of the foundation's projects. One of our current areas of interest is precision nutrition. Can you explain what precision nutrition is?
So I have to start by saying that food is really central to Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. And we know that pretty much the first or second question a patient asks of the doctor after given this diagnosis and having a chance to think about it and to register is, what should I eat? Mm-hmm. And the challenge is that each person is so different that it's right now not the easiest question to answer. And so precision nutrition is a way for us to study the interactions of food and specific types of food, like broccoli or fruit or meat, and understand how the food and the different types of food interact in a particular person, knowing that they have their own unique gene and genetic makeup, inflammatory and immune response, and their own microbiome. And the microbiome are the sort of set of organisms, and there are hundreds of millions of them living in all of us. And we're really particularly concerned with the microbiome in the gut, because there's a major interaction between the food you eat and the kind of microbiome you have. And then the kind of microbiome influences your reaction to the food you eat. So precision nutrition is research that we are funding to give us a handle on understanding in a particular person with all of their attributes, how is food influencing their response to the disease.
And that's a really helpful definition for us. But can you give us an example of some of the research projects we're funding in the area of precision nutrition?
So we're funding right now 4 projects. 2 of those projects are looking at what the researchers believe to be anti-inflammatory diets, where there are foods, if you look at the literature and you look at other studies, where they think that some foods may be pro-inflammatory, some are anti-inflammatory, and they're taking the ones that they think are most likely to be anti-inflammatory. They're putting them into a diet plan and randomizing patients to either be on that diet or eating as they usually do. And then they're going to be looking at just the things that I've been talking about, their immune response, their microbiome, and changes in the blood that might indicate whether the patient has done well or poorly on the diet, and maybe that's a way to find out whether a patient in the future would do well or poorly on the diet. So that's 2 kinds of studies. A third kind is that we know in children with mild Crohn's disease that if you put them on, if you take them off regular food and you put them on what's called enteral nutrition, which is a liquid diet of sort of processed proteins and fats and actually, Laura, you probably know better what's in the enteral diet than I do. But if you put these children on an enteral diet, only on that, and that happens more in Europe than it happens in the US, because it's super difficult to stay just on an enteral diet and not eat regular food. But if you put the kids on the enteral diet, many will actually go into remission and do as well as they would if they had been put on steroids. And so this researcher is now basically taking those children and then feeding them back different food types to see what promotes the inflammation and what the kids are able to tolerate, to begin to have an understanding that really are there foods that are particularly pro-inflammatory in this setting or anti-inflammatory. And then the fourth is really super advanced and uses artificial intelligence to explore big data. First of all, to see whether you can identify what someone has eaten just by looking at blood samples and stool samples. And they're finding that you can, because there are well-known products of food called metabolites, that you can look at blood or stool and pick up what's in there to know what someone's eaten. And then they're going to make correlations between the disease course of the person, what they've eaten, and try to go from there to see whether there are foods more likely to be helpful as part of the diet and not. And then they're going to design a randomized diet to look at this as well. And one caveat, which I didn't mention, but I really am obliged to mention, in all of these studies, patients are going to stay on their current medications. So we're not suggesting that diet alone is going to take care of somebody's Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. This is additive to their current medications and treatment. And we're hoping that maybe that will help get them into remission or stay in remission while on the medications.
I know that the patient and caregiver community that's listening to this evening is so excited to hear about this research, because I'm excited to hear about this research and I can't wait to hear the results. And I know it takes time for research results to come through, but I look forward to educating our patient and provider communities when these results are available.
Yeah, we're all excited about this because we know that it really gets at the heart of what's important to patients. And we know that, when I talked about the pillars of IBD, the sort of key components of IBD, when we think about it, your genetic makeup, your immune response, and your microbiome, critical to getting the disease and the course of the disease are environmental factors. We know that. We don't know enough about these environmental factors, and we know that food is one of the most important ones. And so we are so happy to be able to have gotten funding to support this effort and fund it.
Very exciting research. Another exciting area of research that I've heard a little bit about and I know people are interested in is the work that we're doing around novel technologies for IBD. Can you share how novel technology, such as the wristband, can help address unmet clinical needs for patients with IBD, and why exploring novel technologies and unmet needs are so important?
So when we came up with our recent topics for the challenges in IBD, which, as I mentioned earlier, are our priorities, it really came to our attention, it was brought to our attention, that there's a lot of major innovation in bioengineering. I mean, some of the stuff is really mind-boggling in what bioengineers are thinking about and doing. And we hadn't really been thinking about that in the context of IBD and how to advance that. Maybe there was some low-hanging fruit that could really have an impact on patient lives that wouldn't take that much money or time to invest in and get an outcome. And so we brought a group of experts together, patients, caregivers, bioengineers, clinicians, and surgeons, because surgeons are always very, very tied in with bioengineering. And we brought everybody together and we said, what kinds of problems could novel technologies solve? And actually, one issue that came up that we really focused on is how can we do minimally invasive monitoring? And what I mean is making it easier to see whether someone continues to have underlying inflammation in their gut. Because right now, what does that take? Well, the gold standard, of course, is doing colonoscopy, endoscopy, or even some imaging. But those are difficult, time-consuming, expensive, and it's not something you want to do frequently. And then we have some blood and stool tests that also look at inflammation. Again, you can get it at one point in time. It requires a blood draw or a stool sample, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but nevertheless, nobody wants to have to undergo that frequently. So we thought, well, is there some way through novel bioengineering we can measure underlying inflammation easily? And so we have been supporting Dr. Shalini Prasad, who is a professor of bioengineering at the University of Texas in Dallas. And she has a wristband that measures sweat. Well, it doesn't measure sweat. It measures the chemicals inside sweat. And so she is now measuring these inflammatory markers that you see in inflammation in sweatbands. And first she did it in normal people to see whether she was just going to pick this up, and we do. And now she's expanding and doing it with patients, and now looking at various ways to follow patients over time to see whether we're picking up some of these markers and then correlating. Eventually we'll correlate it with some of these gold standards to see whether someone could just wear a sweatband and over 24 hours see what kind of level of inflammation they have.
So would you be correlating the results from the sweatband to like a fecal calprotectant or another type of test?
Exactly. And then what we'll have to figure out, if this really comes to pass that we can measure it, we then have to figure out how to use it best, and how often and what you correlate it with. But first, we have to make sure that it's going to work, and then we'll figure out the best way to use it. Because I just want to add that it's going to be important, really, to measure whether someone has ongoing inflammation in the gut as we move to what's called a treat to target approach to care, where really, if you want to get into a deep remission and stay in the remission, it's really important to go into a remission that's associated with mucosal healing and lack and sort of the absence of inflammation in the gut. So monitoring inflammation more easily and repeatedly is going to become sort of key to doctors and patients really figuring out where they are in getting to the treatment goal.
again, really exciting research. And from an educator point of view, I can't wait to be able to, on that day, be able to share that not only do we understand deep remission, but now we have the tools to monitor you to get to deep remission.
Right. But
Very
research takes time, Laura, so it is going to take some time.
Well,
we're all eager.
Tell us, Caren, just so we can, help everyone understand, how long does research typically take, so that, just on average?
So it really depends. If for a basic biology project, we fund usually a 3-year project. So we will definitely get findings there. And then we like for our research initiatives to fund 6 years if they're showing promise. So 6 years, and you can really get some really robust, influential findings.
So I look forward to doing this program with you annually so we can keep people updated.
That would be great. Yeah.
So I want to switch gears a little bit. I know one of the foundation's current research priorities is also to advance the development of innovative products that can improve the care of IBD patients. So can you tell us a little bit more about our IBD Ventures program and the priorities that it supports?
Absolutely. So this gets back to your original comment that we are funding from sort of actually from the biology and discovery to patient care. Mm-hmm. So we used to fund mainly the discovery, but we've been sort of moving our funding. We still fund discovery, of course, because that's what we're going to need to get to a cure. But we also fund more along the continuum, if you will, to get to products and efforts that can impact patient care in the near future. And so through IBD Ventures, we fund companies and we fund academic researchers who actually have products. And what we do is we fund a critical part of the effort to get from where they are to the next step to be able to get this product into the hands of patients. And so we fund various things, including new types of drugs and biologics, new products that are based on understanding the microbiome and how to influence the microbiome to make it healthier in patients with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. And we fund, for example, we're funding one company, many companies, but one in particular is about a prognostic test. And that company is called Predictimune. And the test. Can
you define what a prognostic is, just in case people don't understand what a prognostic is?
I will in talking about this particular test.
Great.
So it's the company's Predictimune, and their product is called PredictSure IBD. And what PredictSure IBD does currently, and they're looking at it for patients when the diagnosis is made of Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. And at that time, they will find with this test that they predict that a patient will have either a mild course and go into remission pretty readily, or have a severe course where they're going to have lots of relapses in the next 18 months or so. So that's a prognostic test, a predictive test, predicting what course a person is likely to have. This is a company in the United Kingdom, the UK, and they have this product on the market in Europe. And what we're funding is a study in the US to make sure that this is also, they're going to get the same findings for patients in the US. And what this will do is, if we show that it's valid and they're doing other tests to confirm the validity of this test, a doctor and a patient, if they find that the patient is really predicted to have a lot of serious disease with a lot of relapses, might think very early on having one of these getting on one of these disease modifying drugs like Remicade or Humira, right away to try to break that cycle. Whereas if they're predicted to have a mild course, then the doctor and the patient might think about a different first drug to start with.
Wow, that also could be revolutionizing the patient-provider conversation around treatment options and disease course.
Yes, yes.
So I want to ask you to look into your crystal ball for a second. What should IBD patients know about the future research on Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis?
Well, I think the future is very positive. There are a lot of paths being taken. There are paths that we're taking. And I just talked about a few of them, focusing in on new biologics and new drugs and how do you manipulate the microbiome to make it healthier? How do you get at some of these diagnostic tests to help us understand which patients are likely to need or do better on one kind of a drug over another? And then the pharmaceutical industry and the biotech industry is really heavily invested in Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis and are coming out with new therapies that, of course, need to be tested to demonstrate their efficacy and safety. And so what we really need with these wealth of opportunities, we really need the IBD community, the patients with Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, to really think about and consider whether they would get involved in a clinical trial. Because the only way we're going to know whether these new therapies work is by testing them carefully and as safely as possible in patients with the disease. And so we do have our IBD clinical trials community where we try to let patients know what it means to be in a clinical trial and even have a list that they can look up of the clinical trials out there if they really want to get involved, which I hope they really think seriously about. And then the other thing is that I really believe that each patient with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis is unique. And so we need to learn from each and every patient so that through these learnings, we can give back and have better research and better findings and better outcomes. And so we're really asking patients to participate in our study. Right now, it's IBD Partners, where patients can sign up and answer questions and surveys. And we will be expanding on IBD Partners and getting into sort of more innovative technology and technological platforms to really get at patients and really feed back to them and demonstrate our appreciation for all that they're doing by giving us this information to find ways to give value back to them. We think that's super important. We're not going to just take, we need to give back. And we know that. And we really we're working with patients and caregivers now to understand how to give back. But those are two ways that, the IBD community can help us help them.
So the two actions after tonight's call is get engaged with the clinical trials community and sign up to be part of IBD Partners.
Correct. And think about signing on to our new expanded IBD Partners, which may have a different name that we'll be launching next year.
Yeah. Well, we'll do another one of these and
Right.
help inform the community.
Right.
Well, that's all the time we have for tonight's chat. Dr. Heller, thank you for your time and the expertise you've shared with us this evening, and all the work that you and the Foundation's research team and volunteers do to support our research priorities and efforts. Do you have any last words you'd like to leave the community?
I do. I want to just first, there's so many people to thank. I do want to thank our supporters. I want to thank our listeners who are watching this, because they enable us to do the work, and my team, the research team, and our educators as well. We're all in this together. And so we really rely on your support. We're trying to make our work as focused on you as we can. And I'm just grateful for everybody to enable us to do this. So.
Agreed. I couldn't have said it better. So to end tonight's evening, if you've enjoyed this session, we hope that you'll consider sharing this recording that's going to be posted in the chat. We'll also be making this available on Facebook, our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, so that every member of the IBD community can have access. I will also want to thank the supporters who made tonight's programs possible: Takeda, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Pfizer. And if you have questions that maybe we didn't cover this evening, please reach out to the IBD Help Center. They're available to answer your questions about our research programs. Again, you can email them at info@crohnsandcolitisfoundation.org, or you can call at 1-888-MY-GUT-PAIN. Thank you, everyone, for participating in tonight's program during Crohn's and Colitis Awareness Week. Take care.